Leslie then obtained her law degree from the University of Ottawa in 2013, and after completing her articles, was called to the bar in 2014. Leslie is actively involved in the intellectual property community as a committee member of the Intellectual Property Institute of Canada and the International Trademark Association, INTA. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to Leslie from our sponsor, Marks & Clerk. We're delighted to be here today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jess. So today I'm going to be providing you with a bit of an introduction to trademarks. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them during the presentation, but I should have some time at the end as well. There we go. So what is a trademark? Sometimes there's some confusion as to the different types of intellectual property. So a trademark is a combination of letters, words, sounds, or designs that distinguish one company's goods or services from others. So essentially what you're looking at is this is a source indicator. You know where these goods are coming from, you know who makes them. If you're an iPhone user, you know what you get when you buy an iPhone. Because a trademark guarantees the quality of the goods or services. So if you're picking a trademark, what are some things to consider here? So you want to pick a strong trademark because it helps to avoid confusion with other marks, but it's also more easily enforceable against other people. So here we have a continuum of what we call distinctiveness. So you've got weak to strong marks. Weak marks are more generic. So escalator is a generic term. It actually used to be a trademark, but it fell into common parlance. People just started calling moving staircases escalators, so now it's not a trademark anymore, it's a generic term. A descriptive mark, so this is cold and creamy for ice cream. Everyone who makes ice cream is going to be calling their ice cream cold and creamy, so you want to stay away from something that is that descriptive. A suggestive mark would be something like KitchenAid, because KitchenAid appliances aid you in your kitchen. You generally know what the goods are, but it's not descriptive. Stronger marks are arbitrary, so we've got BlackBerry for cell phones, Apple for cell phones. Even though it's a word you all know, there's nothing connecting the goods to the mark itself. And then the strongest marks are coin terms. So Kodak, Exxon, Xerox. No one else is using those terms because they're made up that you're going to have the strongest rights in a coin term. Something also to be aware of is that marks that are comprised of names, surnames, or geographic locations tend to be weak and they might not be registerable. So you want to try to stay away from those. So if you're looking to register a mark, what can you register? You can register a word mark, like Coca-Cola, just a design, like the Nike Swish, marks that are comprised of words and designs, like the Starbucks. And then in Canada, we have what's called a distinguishing guise, and this is the shaping of the goods or their packaging. So in this case, it's Toblerone. Actually, yesterday in Europe, there was Kit Kat lost their trademark for the 4 chocolate bars on the basis that it wasn't considered to be distinctive. So distinguishing guises are harder to protect, but it's not impossible. And then sound marks are registrable now. They hadn't been for a really long time. The Trademarks Office had taken the position that they weren't. And then MGM took them to court, and they were successful in that. So the MGM Lion Roar is an example of a sound mark. Also, Ricola is registered as well. I'm not going to do it, but you know what it is. So those are some examples of what you can register with the Trademarks Office. So why bother? Why bother with the trademark registration? Unlike patents, you don't have to register a trademark to garner rights to it, but there are some significant benefits to registration. So first of all, you have exclusive rights to the trademark across Canada for 15 years, and that's renewable forever. The 15-year date will be changing in the next couple years. Our Trademarks Act went through a pretty significant overhaul a few years ago. Those amendments aren't in force yet, But when they do come into force, we're going to 10 years, which is basically the international standard. Right now they're saying 2019, but the original enforced date was 2015, so we'll see where that goes. If you have a trademark registration, you have more options for enforcement, and I'm going to talk about that towards the end. Also, something big, if you plan on doing any business in the province of Quebec, you do not have to translate a registered trademark. And the Office of Official Languages in Quebec takes the position that it has to be registered, even though that's a little bit unclear in the legislation or case law. It also serves as a notice to others if you mark it as a trademark on your packaging, or the Trademarks Office's database is available to anyone. You can search anything for a trademark. Everything is available pretty well immediately after filing, so you know what people are doing almost immediately. And also for Canadian registrants, this is something new that will be coming soon when the new amendments to the Act come into force, is we'll be able to access the World Intellectual Property Office's international registration. So you need to have a registration in your home country. So again, this wasn't previously available to Canadians, but essentially you put in one application and you tick the boxes for the countries you want to cover, pay your fees, and then that's it, you're done. The applications will go through their own examination process in each individual country's office, but it's much more simple. And you're looking at the US, the EU as a block, and also the individual member countries, China, Japan. Most countries in the world are already members. We're a little bit late to the game on this one. So that will be available in the next couple years. There's also a significant business advantage associated with registering a trademark. This is an asset. Your IP is an asset to your company. It can be bought and sold like any other type of asset that you have. I think it was the CEO of Coke who said, like, they could lose everything. They could lose all their production. If everything burnt down tomorrow, as long as they had their trademark and their recipe for Coke, they would be fine. They could rebuild their business. So that's something to consider as well. Like I said before, it can be renewed forever. You just have to pay your fee. It's an effective communication tool for your customers, and it makes it easy for them to find you. You can use the internet and social media. Like, if you might want to consider using your trademark as like your Twitter handle or Instagram or something like that. And it can also make hiring easier. If people know you, they'll know your brand, they want to work for you. So if you're going to register your trademark, just a couple things to consider before filing. If you file for just what we call a simple word mark in all caps, it covers every font and color and even some design styles. So if you protect Barbie, you have Barbie in the font is protected. But there might be a reason to cover the font as well. We would always recommend, if you have the budget, to file both. But if you don't, file the word mark, because then if you go through a rebrand in 5 years, you're still using the same mark, but you've decided on new colors, new fonts, new whatever, you're covered. You also want to consider doing a clearance search to see what other people are doing. We can just search the trademarks register, or we can also do common law sources, which would include domain names, business name registrations, just general internet searches, and see what other people in the field are doing. So then you'll get a full opinion as to any likely risks that might be encountered, and then we can suggest strategies for avoiding conflicts and maximizing your rights. So if you want to place an application on file with the Canadian Trademarks Office, this is what you need. You have to identify your trademark. If it's anything other than a word mark, you have to provide an electronic copy of it to the Trademarks Office. You need the name and address of the applicant, and it must be a single legal entity. You can't have two people or two companies apply for a trademark unless they're operating as a partnership or a joint venture. This is going to be changing with when the new act comes in as well, but currently you have to be one single entity to file a trademark application. You also need to provide a listing using specific and ordinary commercial terminology of the goods or services that you're interested in. Canada has the strictest requirements for specificity in the world, so you can't just say clothing. You have to say clothing, namely athletic wear, bridal wear, swimwear, or t-shirts, shorts, jeans. So this is something pre-filing we can help you with. It will help you down the road because that is what the majority of objections happen in trademarks application due to the goods and services. Currently, you also need a basis. If you've already used the trademark in Canada, you have to tell them in the application. You can be approximate, you can give a month or a year, but it has to be claimed. And then the $250 fee. So this is an outline of the trademark registration process. You file your application, then it gets examined. Right now, examination times are about 12 to 15 months. So you're going to wait at least a year after filing. If you get any objections, again, most of the time it's for the goods and services, but also this is where you would run into trouble if anybody else has a confusing trademark application, or if your mark is descriptive in a particular way, or is the name of the goods or a person's name. You'll run into objections there. Again, we can help with that pre-filing, so this will add cost to the process. Then it gets approved and then advertised in the Trademarks Journal. This is the public notice so that anybody can then object to your trademark application. Most of the time it's on the basis of confusion, so someone else who has a similar mark and they don't think you're entitled to it, they can then oppose you. It's a semi-formal contentious proceeding. It's mostly done through paper filings. There's no kind of in-court appearances or anything like that. Evidence is done through affidavits. So it's similar to a court proceeding, but more simple. If you're successful in defending your application, or if it doesn't get opposed at all, then it gets allowed. Then if it's based on prior use in Canada, you can pay your fee and you get a registration. If you hadn't used your mark before filing, you can't get a registration without putting your mark into use in Canada. So you can get extensions of time to do that if you're not quite there yet. From filing, you have about 6 years to put the mark into use. So those are just some things to consider. You can also file partial declarations. So if you've used with some goods and not others, or you've lost interest in some of the stuff in your application, you can get rid of it, file your declaration, and get your registration. Right now, best case scenario, this takes approximately 18 to 24 months, give or take a bit, and you're probably looking at about $2,000 for the whole process. So if you want to prevent a loss of rights, these are some things just to keep in mind. The first is to use the mark consistently, font, color, placement on packaging, on your website and social media, that kind of thing. Don't use the mark in a generic sense or as a verb. Google it. I'm just going to Xerox some papers. You don't want to do that. Band-Aid changed their jingle because of it. It used to be I'm stuck on Band-Aid because Band-Aid stuck on me. Now it's I'm stuck on Band-Aid brand because Band-Aid stuck on me. You don't want your mark to become generic because you can lose your trademark because of it. Aspirin lost their mark in the US because it had become, acetaminophen and aspirin had become interchangeable. So you really want to be careful for stuff like that. I mean, most people are probably using Google when they say they're going to Google something, but you still want to be aware of that. So there's no requirements for marking in Canada, which is different from other countries. So if you are going to be using your mark in other countries, be aware of their marking requirements. But you should consider using the R in the symbol if it's a registered mark, or just the little TM if it's not. After registration, it becomes susceptible to cancellation on the basis of non-use. So Canada has a use it or lose it system. You will only be called upon to provide evidence of use in certain situations, but it's something to be aware of. You want to minimize any changes in the mark. So if you didn't just file for a word mark, you filed for a design, and you've made some changes, you might want to consider refiling to ensure you're still protected. And also license carefully. If you're letting somebody else use your trademarks, Canada has some really strict licensing requirements. So that's something to be aware of and something really you should be getting advice on. And also, so enforcement. You might want to consider use of a formal watch service to monitor what other people are doing. They'll let you know when other applications are filed that are similar to your mark. And then you might want to oppose someone else. So, also run regular internet searches, check social media. You want to know what people are doing. Lots of people are doing problematic things, but they're not filing applications. So the watch service won't help if they're, if they haven't filed an application. So be aware of what other people in your industry are doing. And then you may want to consider infringement proceedings. Now, this is where a registration will help you significantly. If you don't have a registration, you're restricted to a passing off action, which is much harder to prove because, one, you have to prove that you have goodwill in the mark, you have a good reputation, and B, that you have actually suffered damage because of the other person's actions. Infringement is easier because you only have to show a likelihood of damages, and while you do have to file evidence of your reputation because you have a registered mark, it's assumed by the court. So if you are planning on going after anybody, you really want a registration here. So that's kind of the gist of it. If anybody has any questions.